Hello, readers and friends. Today is Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022. And for the past few weeks, I've bent your ears on my notions of long-term grieving. Okay, let's just say for the past month, that's what I've been doing. As with anything we do in life that we do for many years without stopping, without forgetting, without surrendering, we get good at it. My grieving has altered and I'm moving forward. We've all heard of the 10,000-hour rule popularized by Malcolm Gladwell's bestseller Outliers. According to Gladwell, the rule is simple. It takes 10,000 hours of intensive practice to achieve mastery of some complex skills. For instance, if you practice for 3 days, for 3 hours a day, in just a little over 9 years, you'll be an expert. You'll have 10,000 hours in. So I've got a bit over 22 years in grieving. Am I an expert? I'm not sure what the complex skills one would need to achieve mastery in grieving. And I'm going to be really judgmental here. What an incredibly pointless goal that would be. No, what I'm talking about is living life with the grief, moving forward to be the best I can be despite my loss, despite the mind-numbing grief that sometimes just grabs me unexpectedly, taking me down. I've learned to suit up and show up, and most people I encounter during that particular day, week, or month do not know that inside I am barely functioning. I would rather be back in bed with the covers over my head, sleeping, or at least binge watching a Danish thriller. What has been essential for me has been my inner life, the quality of my life and my well-being. I am living life. I am creating a life with loss and content most of the time. I am moving forward when I would rather just live in the past. I take care of myself the best I can. You probably don't know when I show up that I'm breaking on the inside because I'm showing up as the professional, the giver. I have spent years gathering trusted ones I take from, who give me space to wallow periodically in my grief. One of my favorite activities always has been my love of reading. Reading has been the one thing that has saved me since I was a very young girl. I have my favorite genres such as mysteries, but my all-time favorite is fantasy. Perhaps that's why I write romances and women's books. In fantasies, anything can happen. Any world can exist. Any bodies can meet and fall in love. Complete languages and cultures can be created. As long as you can imagine it, it can be written about. And during my early grief, reading continued to save me. And I honestly don't remember most of the books I read during the first 10 years of my grief because my process was so internal. I just automatically turned to reading like some people turn to a line of Coke or a Twix candy bar or a shot of bourbon. George MacDonald died in 1905 at age 81 years young. He was a Scottish author, poet, and a Christian minister. He tried life as a minister when he was in his 20s, and he actually had his salary cut in half because he wasn't doing such a good job as a minister. He also published works on theology and wrote several collections of sermons. Also, but they didn't do very well. Yet his greatest accomplishment is his writing. What George MacDonald created starting in the mid 1850s was this new genre. This man wrote fairy tales. He was a pioneering figure in modern fantasy literature. He made it okay to write about things not seen, not understood, but felt in our psyches. He wrote about fairies. He wrote fantasies. In 1985, when he was 71 years old, he published his most famous work, Lilith. It's about parallel universes, life and death. There's the group of little ones who never grow up, and his protagonist is always unsure if he's really awake. Maybe he's actually dreaming that he's awake. George MacDonald said, "I write not for children, but for the childlike, whether they be of 5 or 50 or 75. He has inspired a legion of authors who have created some of the best fantasy books in the world, or some of the best fantasy worlds. Alice in Wonderland. George MacDonald was Lewis Carroll's mentor. T.H. White wrote The Once and Future King, that great Arthurian fantasy. And C.S. Lewis, who is also a Christian writer, read George's book, Fantasies, as he, C.S., was waiting for a train one day. The result was a young adult fantasy series called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Madeleine L'Engle wrote the Wrinkle in Time Quintet for young adults. And then, of course, there's Neil Gaiman, who wrote dozens of books, including American Gods, Coraline, and Good Omens. Many fantasy writers wrote for young adults, and most of those books started appealing to older audiences. Lucky us. So back to George MacDonald. His most famous works are the fantasies, The Princess and the Goblin. Yep, I'm having a little bit of difficulties with my little mouse here. I'm not sure what's going on. Okay. So George MacDonald wrote fantasies, The Princess and the Goblin, The Light Princess, The Wise Woman, and of course, Lilith. And because I love to read, I discovered George and I did some research in his life. I learned that George was also a poet. He wrote a poem called Lost and Found. And here's the part that's relevant to me. You might want to read the whole poem. It's not very long, and we put the link below in the description. Through books and arts and works without an end, but found him not, the friend whom I had lost. And yet I found him as I found the lark, a sound and feels I heard, but could not mark. These words soothed me, lifted me, a secret that I could carry in my heart in those days when I could only suit up and show up. And then a few years ago, I found this incredible poem by George that just blew my socks off. George MacDonald. Come home. That's it. Just 2 words. These 2 words conjure up whole libraries, theaters crowded with movies and plays, museums bursting with paintings and sculptures, melodious concerts and albums filled with words and music and poetry. Oh yes, poetry, straight to my core. When I first read this, I was so transformed. I felt my whole heart tugging at me, asking me to come home. What an intention. My grief has asked me to open my heart to come home again. And I answer with these words. The first line I cribbed from George. Come home. Dear heart, you belong to you. that's it for today, folks. Thank you. Oh, except for this one little detail. If you saw the promo for this week's From the Writer's Room on social media, it was accompanied by a somewhat mysterious picture of a winding road. I had shared with AC my plan to include George MacDonald's Come Home in today's chat. He tells me that it's meant to be the road home. So now you know. I happen to think it's a great picture. As always, I'm very grateful you could join me today. I would love to hear back from you. You can leave a note in the comments here or drop me a line through Facebook, Instagram, or email. All the particulars are in the description. And before we close, I want to remind you to like this video just below me here and click that red subscribe button to make sure you're notified of all that happens on my YouTube page. Also, if you think you know someone who might like to join us, please pass on my links. I continue to learn from you, and the more folks in the conversation, the more interesting it becomes. Of course, new readers are always welcome as well. Far better than any advertising is a personal recommendation. So please do share my stories with those who might enjoy them. The address of my Amazon page is in the description as well. All of the Walkerville Desire series are available to purchase there, both Kindle and print editions. And as always, the direct link for next week's live chat is there too. Hope to see you then. And thanks again for joining me. It's going to be March the next time we talk. Bye.
You're clear.
That was faster, clearing me.
Oh yeah. Well, again, because